Oye, Yolota. In this video, we're going to take a look at a combination of a couple of things. So one of these is going to be data validation and showing you a couple techniques with that. That's what we're going to build towards. But the thing that I'm going to show you in Sheets, it's one of the few things that Sheets actually, by my consideration, does much better than Excel, is what we call checkboxes. So I've labeled this tab actually checkboxes because that's what we're going to build towards. We've used this approach quite a bit in both QR2 and QR3 to make selections from different materials from which we're choosing. Now, if you're doing this in Excel, I'd recommend doing this with nested if statements. I guess we're doing that either way, which is where you take one if statement and put it inside another, however many you need. But this makes it a quick way for us to actually switch off different selections. In Excel, because the checkboxes, at least from what time I've invested in it, aren't as nice as Sheets, I'm going to show you initially how you would do this in Excel. And then I'm going to show you one of the cool things that Sheets has that is a little more streamlined. Okay, so let's say that I'm choosing between a variety of different satellites. Let's say that I've got 3 of them. I could choose from the A series, the B series, or the C series. Now each of them have their own cost, $500, $600, $700, a different weight, 10 kilograms, 15, and 20, and then a given power. So maybe the power gets bigger, more power for a heavier and more costly satellite. Usually there's a trade-off there. And you would be weighing this against all sorts of things. But the big thing that I want is something where I can actually select and quickly move from one to the other. So I've got a spot here down below that I've marked as my current selection. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a 1, a 0, and a 0 here. So the checkboxes can easily be replaced by 1s and 0s, which are an easy mathematical way of setting up a true-false statement so that you can actually work with your if statements, which are based off of checking if a statement is true or false. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say equals, so that I can get the spreadsheet to do some work for me. I'm going to say if this cell, A3, is equal to 1, then I want it to return whatever's next to it. Else, normally I would say return something different, but now I want it to check the next cell. So I'm going to put in another if statement, and then I'm going to continue going with more ifs. So I'm going to say, okay, if the first one fails, I want it to check the next one. If this is equal to 1, then return the thing next to it. But if that fails, I want it to do one more if statement and check the last one. If this is equal to 1, I want it to return this. Oops. Let's see. I accidentally clicked on something that made it stop doing what I wanted it to, so I apologize on that. So we've got that. Now I'm going to have it where it'll return that. And then finally, I need an else, what it'll do if everything fails. In this case, I'm going to put a quotation mark, a space, and an end quotation mark. And then that way, if you don't put anything, it'll just treat the cell as though it is 0, and you can still do math on it. One of the things that I found can be very useful is if nothing is going in there, you can get the cell to be ignored by any mathematical operation by putting quotation mark, space, quotation mark. Okay, looks like it's going to scream at me about a bunch of different parentheses, but let's see if it likes it. Okay, it seems like it was fine. It has added a sufficient number of end parentheses for me. And so here I have a 1 next to A series saying that that's true. I'm going to change this over. Watch what happens if I put a 1 next to B series. It still says A series because when the computer is going through and checking these, it does them in order of the statements. So since it found a true statement at the very beginning, it returned B3, which says A series, and then it stopped. It will continue going until it finds the thing that matches the criteria. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn off A series. Okay, great. Now that I've done that, now it says B series. If I put this to 0, it goes all the way through and says, okay, I don't see any 1s, and it returns the space that I put into it. I can put a 1 next to the C series, and it brings that up. Okay, now what I would like, the C series is fine, but what I really want is to be able to select the numbers so that I can pull the number that is in this cell specifically to see add up for my total cost, and here to add up for my total mass, and here my total power, that sort of thing. So here's what I'm going to do. I want to make certain that anything that's in column A stays in column A because I'm going to drag this to the side. And I want everything else to move, but it's column A that is where I'm keeping track of what I'm selecting. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to put dollar signs just in front of A. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drag this over. And now we've got the following. It has gone ahead and followed along, keeping everything with A the same because I put a dollar sign there. And now I have it filling in all of these. Now I could have more components underneath this and do the exact same setup. And now I can say, all right, I want the C series and I want some other setup. And then I just have my spreadsheet total up whatever number is here for the cost. So right now it would be 700. But if I went with a different configuration, maybe I want to go with the A series, then it would pull $500, 10 kilograms, and 50 watts. And I could add that to the other values. One thing that I like to do is to help draw attention that this is a little bit different. So I'm going to color this, I don't know, maybe a blue color, bright blue. In many of the things that you see me do, you'll see that I like to use color to organize things. So a lot of times I will say, okay, the first option might be in red, the second option might be in green, the third option might be in blue. And so having it where there's some good contrast there. And there are a lot of other color palettes that have even better contrast and maybe things to look into. Okay. So that's how you can do this in any of the spreadsheets, but it can be a bit of a pain to type in ones and zeros, and sometimes moving from cell to cell can be a bit of a pain. So I'm going to switch this out real quick. First off, I'm going to break my system, but then I'm going to go through and do the following. I'm going to highlight these three, and this is something that Sheets does, by my consideration, much better than Excel. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down to View More Cell Options, and I'm going to go to Data Validation. Now there's a bunch of stuff that you can do with this, but we're going to start by clicking Add Rule. Okay, they have drop downs criteria, so that's a thing that you could play with. I don't do many drop downs, but that's one that you could do. Instead of having each of these as the A series, the B series, and so forth, you could actually set up a drop down where you could select different ones. But I'm not going to show that one, at least right now. Feel free to play with that. But I'm going to go down to checkbox. And on the checkbox, I'm going to go with Use Custom Cell Values. If it's checked, by default that's true. Well, I'm going to label that a 1 so I can do math on it. And unchecked is 0. So I'm going to go through and click Done. I basically replaced the 1s and 0s that I have to do typing on with a checkbox that I can quickly select the checkbox. Now, when I check this one, B series is checked. I can uncheck it, I can go to C series or A series, and it's still treating it as 1s and 0s, just the same as I had before, but now I've got it where it's much easier for me to turn on and off options. We can see once again, if I have A selected first, it will stop after it finds A, it won't go to check B. But I can then uncheck A and it will go to whatever the first thing it encounters. So basically, this is a slightly different way of doing the 1s and 0s, and the way in particular that Sheets works, it's actually a little bit easier to work with the checkboxes. Feel free to play around with the drop downs as well. Once again, that is right click, go down to View More Cell Actions and Data Validation. Now I've got some rules here. I could also add additional checkboxes in additional spots. So add another range, I could add some checkboxes here. And then fill in my materials based on that as well. Or I can click Done, and I can add a different rule, maybe with a drop down of some kind. So there are a lot of options that we can actually do with this. On this one, that's nothing, so I'm going to delete that. And you can also remove all if you want to say, nope, I'm going to start all over. All right. Hopefully this was useful for you. Until next time.